Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Central Wisconsin Book Festival for our event today with Deborah Ellis. My name is Elizabeth Lutz, and I'm one of the festival organizers. You can say hi in the chat with your name and where you're tuning in from this evening. You can turn your camera on if you'd like, but please leave your microphones muted and use the chat for any questions that you may have. I'd like to take a moment first to thank our festival sponsors with a short video.
Hello, and welcome to the 2021 Central Wisconsin Book Festival. Before we begin, we would like to thank those organizations and businesses that help make this year's festival possible.
Our presenting sponsors and benefactors this year are
the Community Arts Grant Program and Community Foundation of North Central Wisconsin,
with funds provided by the Wisconsin Arts Board,
the Community Foundation,
the BA and Esther Greenheck Foundation,
the Marathon County Public Library Foundation,
Ware, and the Covantage Cares Foundation.
Our 2021 sustainers are Wisconsin Humanities,
with funds from the National Endowment for the Humanities,
the Portage County Public Library Foundation.
Other supporters include the Marathon County Public Library,
the Portage County Public Library,
McMillan Memorial Library,
the Friends of the Marathon County Public Library,
the Marathon County Historical Society,
Whitewater Music Hall,
Wisconsin Public Radio,
and Janke Bookstore.
Thank you so much to all of our sponsors and supporters.
And thanks to you.
Thanks to you.
And thanks to you.
And thank you to you.
Thanks to you.
all of our authors, all of our readers.
And thanks to you for being part of the Central Wisconsin Book Festival.
Now I'd like to introduce our guest for this evening. Deborah Ellis is a Canadian author of books for children. She has written over 30 books, including the Breadwinner trilogy, which has been translated into 25 languages. Her work has been awarded a number of prominent honors over the years. In 2006, she was named to the Order of Ontario. In her novels and nonfiction collections, she looks at the impact of war, injustice, and oppression on the lives of children, and explores how we can build a better world together. She says, when writing stories for young people, I have to try to see the situation through the young characters' eyes. What would they see? What would they feel? What would they understand? And what would their choices be? The stories also need to end with at least a little bit of hope. Even if the situation is still bleak, the character has a bit more wisdom and a bit more strength to be able to face the next challenge with at least the hope of success. Deb, welcome to the Central Wisconsin Book Festival today.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear
good. You. Okay, so should I just start?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thanks for letting me be a part of this festival. It's kind of funny to be doing it from so far away, but I hope you're all really having a great time at the festival and really enjoying all the presenters. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a few books that I've got with me in my kitchen. The first one I'm going to start with is the latest book. It's called The Greats. And I wrote this book because everywhere I travel mainly to places where there are not a lot of resources put into mental health supports. The countries don't have a lot of resources generally, and mental health supports for people are often at the very end of the spectrum of things that people put money into. And so I've often wondered, what is it like to be emotionally in trouble and have very few places where you can go to for help? I remember being in the Afghan refugee camps in Pakistan 20 years ago. And there was a mental health clinic run by the Red Crescent Society. And they had no medications. They had there's a doctor there and a couple of attendants, but the only help they had for people was a shock treatment machine. And so this woman came in with her husband. She suffered great trauma over the years of the war there and was in a bad state. And the only thing that they could offer her was to take her to this little shed that had a corrugated tin roof the roof was mostly missing, so you could look up and see the sky. And there's a little cot in the shed. And so she got onto the cot and they put electrodes on the side of her head, no anesthetic, no nothing, and a piece of wood to bite on. And they gave her shock treatment because that was all they had to help this poor woman. And I know that in many other places in the world, that situation is replicated, that people are in trouble and they don't have resources to know how to get themselves out of trouble. And I think we lose a lot of people that way. So I wanted to do a book that focused on that, on how can we look after each other and ourselves when we don't have access to professional supports, or when we don't feel like we are able to access those supports. A lot of kids perhaps don't feel comfortable calling in medical professionals when they're in trouble because they don't trust them. They don't feel like they can like really talk to them. So the Greats came about because I went to Guyana a couple of years ago with a great group called Mental Health Without Borders, which operates out of Kitchener, Ontario, and they work in Guyana helping provide mental health supports for people there. Guyana has a very high rate of suicide, and so I wanted to go down with them, and I got to go with them to meet with the people that they work with in Guyana and to learn more about the issues that people struggle with and how they struggle and how they work with each other to help make things better. And so through that trip and through the people I met there, I kind of came up with a story about this kind of magical night when strange things happen. And one of the strange things that happens is the giant prehistoric sloth that is in the Guyana National Museum comes to life and escapes from the museum. And I remember walking into this museum. It's an incredible place. And there was a sign at the end of the exhibit, giant sloth this way. So I thought, giant sloth, probably big as a dog, right? And I walk into this room and it's as big as a house. It's incredible. It's just the most magnificent thing. I was blown away. And I remember thinking, how great that we live in a planet where this used to walk around. How fabulous. And it just made me very happy. So I incorporated that into the story. So this giant prehistoric sloth has come to life and is walking around modern day Guyana. On that same night, a young boy, 15 years old, named Joman, has just received a medal for winning a geography competition for his high school. And he's at this dinner and he knows he should be happy. He's worked really hard for this. He knows this should be a great moment for him, but he just feels like, I got nothing. I got nothing in my life. My dad is a drunk. My mother is dead. I got this thing that was supposed to make me happy is just not doing it. What's the point? Anyway, he gets himself home and he's trying to kind of keep himself going and talk himself into, okay, I'll get through this. It'll be all right, you know. And then he wakes up in the middle of the night and starts to run, and he can't remember why he's running or where he's going or why he left the house, just that he's running. And he ends up getting arrested. And he ends up on this kind of strange journey as he is arrested, in jail, sent to a youth detention center, and he is contemplating suicide. He has figured out how he's going to make this happen. His life is not worth living. Anything that he had going for him, he's blown it now by getting arrested. And so he thinks, that's it. I'm done. I'm done with this nonsense. And he plans to kill himself. And while he is making those plans, a very strange visitor shows up in the cell next to him and takes him on this journey through Guyana, where Joman's life and the life of this prehistoric sloth kind of intersect in interesting ways. And I remember when I was thinking about suicide, and we hear a lot about generational suicide, and I was thinking about like why that happens, like parents and grandparents and great-grandparents, that string of suicide can sometimes run through a family. And the way people with greater minds than mine have figured this out much better than I have, but in terms of the way I thought about it as when we have parents who do certain things, then we can think of, well, that's an option for me. Like my mom was a nurse, my sister became a nurse, it looked like an option for her. And when a parent commits suicide, that has the same weight to it, that becomes like an option that we can consider as being a realistic possibility for our lives. And so you have all these different families where generations have had suicides in them, and the burden of that gets passed down from one generation to the other. So it becomes almost like, this is what we do in our family. This is how we live. This is how we run. And this is what my own destiny is going to be. So John meets up with some very strange characters, kind of out of the blue and out of the past, who come to help him break that cycle of generational suicide and help him figure out how he can make a life that is worth living, at least for the next moment. So that was that's how the Greats came about. And it was really interesting to me to see, to be able to sit in with sessions with the mental health professionals that came down from Canada and work with those in Guyana, to see the kinds of issues that people were talking about and how universal those issues are. Hopelessness, being beaten in the home, alcoholism, and dealing with addictions, dealing with this sense that nothing is ever going to get better. I think we've heard that people's sense of hopelessness has sometimes increased during COVID, and we need to find ways to help keep that going, keep their hope going, that things can get better, that we can dig ourselves out of holes that we find ourselves into. So my hope for the Greats, one, is that it raises a lot of money for the Mental Health Without Borders people, so they can continue to do their good work down in Guyana. And also it gives us a sense of our ability to talk with one another about suicide in general, and also how we can help each other, how we can build communities that look out for each other and maybe help make our days a little bit better. I think I'm thinking a lot about Afghanistan right now, as I imagine a lot of people are, and thinking about the folks there who have worked so hard over the last 20 years to try to make that country work properly. And I can't even imagine how they are going to get over this hopelessness that they will find themselves in, and get over it enough to continue the grind, to continue to go on another day, to keep moving forward when it seems like they've been slammed right back to where they were 20, 25 years ago. We hope that things will get better, but it's hard to really always imagine that that's going to be the case. I do know from the meetings I held with folks in Afghanistan and in the refugee camps in Pakistan prior to being able to go into Afghanistan, I know that there are people that got lost to us, that when we have people anywhere who have experienced horrific trauma over and over and over again, sometimes they can't bounce back. They did everything that they could do to get out of the camp and to make themselves and their families safe. And then once they got there, there was nothing left, and they just closed in on themselves and waited to die. They were just done. On the camps, who were like incredible people. A lot of them were teachers, and so some of these teachers would go into the camps, having been run out of the country by the Taliban, come into the camps, organize the students, say, in this patch of grass and patch of weeds and dirt, we will build a school. And so the kids from the camp would come, and they'd look in the garbage dumps for anything that they could use for a school supply. And they would try to build a school out of that, scratching numbers in the dirt and teaching the kids to move and to sing and to recite the alphabet and to do things that would make the kids feel like kids again, just like giants. These folks were giants. So I imagine that now in Afghanistan, it's a lot of similar things, that people are both being paralyzed by hope and terror, or paralyzed by lack of hope and by terror, but there's also you just know there's a great deal of scheming going on behind the scenes of folks and who are trying to figure out, okay, what can we do if this is our new life? If this is our framework, now what are we going to do with that? So I wanted to read to you an interview from this book, Kids of Kabul. I was in Afghanistan about 10 years ago now. Jeepers, time goes by. And I met with a bunch of kids there, talking about what had happened in their lives and what they wanted now for their future. And since this is a book festival, I wanted to read about an interview I did with a young boy. Sigrula is his name, and he's 14 years old at the time of the interview. And he was living in a very poor neighborhood of Kabul. And the Afghan Women's Resource Center there had set up a community center for kids and folks in the area. And so this is what he has to say. Remember, he's 14, 10 years ago, he'd be 24, 25 now. These are his words. My father is a carpenter. He works in a furniture shop, making frames for beds, tables, things like that, when he is well. Right now he is sick, so he is not working. I work as a tailor's helper. It brings in some money, and so our family eats. I'm learning to be a proper tailor so that I can earn even more money, but that is not really the kind of work I want to do. I really want to be an electrical engineer because there are not a lot of people in Afghanistan who can do that kind of work. It would be easy to find a good job. I would like to bring electricity to all of Afghanistan because when people have electric lights, it's good for their eyes to study at night. Most people work all day and the only time they can sit with a book is at night, so they need electric lights. I might also be a doctor because Afghanistan needs doctors. A lot of kids here want to be teachers because to be a teacher is holy work. I'm a member of the children's committee at this community center. The people who run this center told everyone they were looking for children to do this job. I thought it would be a good thing to do, so I applied and I was chosen. It's a volunteer job. We don't get paid. Now, this is a very poor area of Kabul, so people have a lot of problems. People come here from all parts of Afghanistan because Kabul is the capital city. They think it will be very nice, very safe, with good jobs. I'm from Parwan province and another committee member is from Paktia. We come from all over. In this committee, we learn about children's rights and human rights. We learn about what the law says people should do and should not do. We talk about what rights parents have and what people should do for their country. Children in this area have a lot of problems. It is our job to find out what the problems are and to see if we can fix them. We talk to the children who come here for courses and we ask them, how is your life? Are you happy? Are you being well treated? We also ask children these questions when we meet them in the neighborhood outside the center. They have a lot of problems because they are poor. Their parents get upset and hit them, or there is no food in the house, or they want to come to courses at the center and their parents won't allow it. We will hear about a girl who is being forced to marry someone she doesn't want to. These are big problems, bigger than we can solve. But we can talk to children about their rights and the law, and sometimes we can explain things to their parents. We can discuss things with adults who run the center, and they can sometimes talk to the parents and help them out with food or find out what's making them so angry. It doesn't always work, but sometimes it does. They go to the local mullahs and say, too many parents are hitting their children in this neighborhood. Can you preach about that in the mosque? And the mullahs will talk about how Islam is a religion of peace and that children should be protected. We try to keep the neighborhood clean too. We go door to door and tell people not to throw their garbage into the streets because that brings rats and flies, and these things are not good for children. I would like all the streets of Kabul to be cleaner. Many of us have to walk a long way to come to this center every day. The streets are very dusty and a lot of children become sick from the dust. I would like to know how we can fix this problem. There are a lot of people who come to this center, all ages. Ladies come here who are widows, and they learn how to read and to make pickles to sell. There's a room upstairs that they use for exercise and games. Now, it's easy for boys to play around, play games and run around. We can do that anywhere, but it's harder for ladies. I like that we can work together to solve our problems. Talking helps a lot. We had a public meeting here about the distance between parents and children. Children don't tell their parents about their problems, and parents don't talk to their children. It makes problems worse when we don't talk. My favorite part of this center is the library. We have 10 shelves of books, wonderful books, all different books. we need to have different books because we all have different minds. I like books about Afghan history. Some people like books about cooking or poetry or law. I am happiest when I can be in this library. All of our problems can be solved with these books. Afghanistan will have a good future if the government will help all the people learn to read, and if every community could have a good library so that they could find solutions and solve their own problems. So when I get feeling hopeless about the current government, I suppose, in Afghanistan, I remember that the country is full of amazing people like that. And anything that we can do to support what they are going to be trying to do to rebuild the country and to have a life and to have dignity in the current situation, anything we can do to support that is only going to blossom 100-fold under their care. So I hope we don't forget about Afghanistan now that our troops have withdrawn. And so I'm going to talk about a couple of other books and then take some questions. This book is called The Cat at the Wall, and it's about a girl who dies. She lives in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and she dies in a car accident and comes back to life in Bethlehem in the Middle East as a cat. And so as a cat and as a girl who never really looks beyond her own mind and problems, she is plunked down into the situation between Israel and Palestine with all of its complications and difficulties and mixtures of people and things to solve. And so she's trying to figure out both her own life before she died and this new life that she finds herself in this little house with a boy who's been hiding from the soldiers who have taken over the house to try to look out over the neighborhood. I was in Israel and Palestine a couple of times. The first time, gosh, was a long time ago now. And I did a book called 3 Wishes, which is interviews with children from Israel and Palestine. That was before the big wall got put up. It was just in the beginning stages when I was there at first. When I was there again a number of years ago, it was the wall was up and people were even more divided. The possibilities of talking and dialogue and meeting back and forth were even fewer than they had been when I was there the first time. So it's hard to figure out how to make things better if we're not able to talk to one another. So The Cat at the Wall reflects that. No Ordinary Day is a book that takes place in India. And now there's a group in Canada called the Leprosy Mission, and they do work all over the world working with people who have leprosy. Now we've kind of forgotten about leprosy as being a disease that still exists, but it does. And this organization, the Leprosy Mission, works with people to both get the treatment, to get tested, and to rehabilitate their limbs and so forth so that they can work and continue to have a life that they can feel proud and have dignity with. No Ordinary Day takes place in Kolkata, an amazing city. It's about a girl named Valley who's about 10. She doesn't really know how old she is because her birth was never registered. She lives alone on the streets of Kolkata, and she finds out by accident that she has this disease of leprosy. And the book is about her trying to find the courage to trust people long enough to get the treatment and to make her life extraordinary. So that's No Ordinary Day. And the last book I'll mention was out last year. It's called My Story Starts Here. And I got the title from graffiti on the railway bridge in my hometown of Simcoe. Someone had scrawled this on the bridge, and I thought, what a perfect title for this book. Because this book is it's interviews with young people in Canada who are in conflict with the law. They talk about how they ended up in conflict, what the decisions that they made to get them in trouble, what their lives were like leading up to that decision, why they took that decision, what they think could have changed their lives to make them make better decisions a little easier, who helped them, who didn't help them, what jail was like for them, what it was like to be arrested, all of that stuff. They talk about that, and they talk about they try to give advice to other young people who might be reading this pre getting involved with the police, to sort of say, here's some things you can maybe think about before you go down the road where the government and the state get involved in your life, and then your life is not your own in the same way that you want it to be. The theme that runs through my story starts here is, of course, a theme of violence. You can trace the line really clearly between abuse and neglect as a child to, landing in trouble with the police. It's just like such a clear line that if we could fix the difficulties that children have earlier in their lives and support their parents to become parents that can deal with their own issues while still raising their child in a kind way, that we could save a ton of money down the road in having to keep kids in prison and adults in prison who generally were children in prison. So those are the books I kind of dug out of my shelf to talk about. If anybody's got any questions, I'm happy to take any of your questions.
We'll take questions in chat. If you'd like to ask your question on video, you can use the reactions to raise your hand and we can pull you up on the screen here. We do have a question from Kathy. What made you so interested in areas that others might ignore, like mental health, conflict, disease?
I don't like things that don't make sense. And if we have a problem and we can either figure out the solution or we have the solution already, then it doesn't make sense to not apply the solution or at least work towards solving the problem. And the kinds of situations that I deal with are things that are generally human-made problems. So war, violence, disease that is allowed to spread when we have the cure, prejudice, things like that. Those are human-made problems. It's not like a volcano erupting that we can't control. So that's, for me, that's kind of why I want to write about this stuff, because it helps me sort of see how we can fix it and might encourage others to do that as well, right? I think that's kind of why I do that.
Yes. I'm wondering, many of your books, your fiction books, are so compact. I'm thinking all the books in the Breadwinner series, they're really 100 pages, maybe 120 pages. How do you get that length of your story right? How do you know when it's done? And what's your editing process like?
I have, there's an editor who works with Groundwood Books that I publish a lot of my books with. Her name is Shelley Tanaka. And she is really, really good at saying, Deb, just knock it off. You're going off in a weird direction. It makes no sense. Scratch it out, start again. And she's really good at helping me to get to the heart of what the story actually is. So that's a huge help to have a great editor like her. I want the books and the stories to be really accessible, even and perhaps especially for kids who don't really like to read. So I want them to be able to pick up the book and get into the story really quickly and know that they can, so that they can feel good about reading it and understanding it and being able to get right into the characters' heads very easily and quickly. Again, so they feel good about themselves reading it and feel empowered to keep on reading. And also that might encourage them to keep reading even more.
Yeah, I really appreciate how your books get to the point right away and the sentences are concise. I feel like that's really accessible for kids and for teachers to read aloud to kids in the classroom.
Oh, good. Thank you.
We have a couple comments here from Anna. Thank you for sharing your experiences. With so many encounters to draw on, how do you decide which encounters to place in your books?
I tend to think of the beginning of a book process as if it's a great big tower without doors or windows, and the story is someplace in the tower, and I'm walking around the tower looking for a door to suddenly appear, and that door will end up being like a voice of a character. Like there's a little girl I met in the leprosy hospital in Calcutta who was ended up being very much like the character in No Ordinary Day. And it was through her character that I began to think of how the story might develop. In The Breadwinner, it was meeting with people in the camps who told me about girls who disguised themselves as boys to be able to survive under the Taliban regime. That immediately was like, okay, that's it. That's the door into the story. So sometimes it takes a while to figure out what that is. But when you know, you know, and that's about as scientific as an answer as I can give you.
Mm-hmm. And facing the challenges, Anna says, facing the challenges of communication, language barriers, travel, how do you deal with those? I guess to sort of get into character. Well, we're lucky in that human beings are all like pretty similar around the world, right? So in The Breadwinner, Parvana and her older sister go at each other a lot. Now I have an older sister, and when we were kids, we went at each other a lot. And so that's easy. That part is easy. The hard part is trying to really do honor to the people that I'm writing about, so that the struggles are shown, but also the resilience and the dignity and like the intelligence and the bravery and all of that is highlighted actually more than the actual struggles of what they're going through, if that makes sense. Right, using your personal experience, I think that gives it strength. It gives your work strength.
Yeah.
Too.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a question from Cheryl, and I'm also wondering if the animated film The Breadwinner was based on your books and how much involvement you had with that production, and then the graphic novel as well.
Yeah, I thought they did an incredible job. Oh my gosh, it was such a beautiful film. So they asked me to write the first draft of the script, and then they got a real screenwriter to continue on, and they found a writer who was really well suited to writing for animation, which is a whole other skill set that I don't have. And she was able to bring more life and to color and so forth into the story. So I had some input, but they also had their own vision for it. There were a lot of people who worked on the film from a lot of different countries, and they each brought their own take and their own like experiences to the story. And I thought all of these different voices coming together just made the film very, very rich. I was incredibly proud to have been associated with it. Yeah,
I think it reaches more people with the film, and then they want to go back and read your original books too.
Well, that'd be nice. Yeah, that'd be good.
Yes. We have a question from Fred. Have you been able to keep in touch with any of the teens you interviewed in your previous books?
Hi, Fred. I know Fred. In some cases, yes, not always possible. In refugee camps, of course, they're spread out. I always send books back to the young people that I interview, if that is possible. So with this book, My Story Starts Here, the young people who were in trouble with the law were able to get their book and to get a copy of the book. And even though there's no identifiers in the book, in Canada, our laws regarding young offenders and identification are very strict. So there's nothing in the book that identifies them. They can go through it and they can see their stories, and there's a real dignity about like having their words in print, right? That it says, yeah, I went through this. I did that. That's my life. There's an importance to what I went through. It means something. So I think that is very, very valuable for them. So when I can, I keep in touch.
Good. We have a request from Cheryl, if you have an excerpt from The Greats that you could read for us.
Yeah, I could do that. So I'll just read a short section. Oh, the first chapter. There is a leak in the wall of Guyana's National Museum. Rain drools down the plaster. The leak gets bigger with each downpour. It threatens to damage the museum's most expensive exhibit. In a large room on the ground floor is a giant prehistoric ground sloth, standing on her haunches, arms reaching up into an artificial cannonball tree. Megatherium gather to her friends and to the people who come to see her. The officials don't think the leak is a big problem, so they ignore it. The leak gets bigger. The officials decide to put a patch over it. Covering up a problem only makes it worse. The heavy Guyana rainwater pools inside the wall, then spreads out to become mini leaks. Water snakes across the floor, putting the treasured exhibit in peril. By the time the officials decide to do the work necessary to fix what is really wrong, the damaged wall has to be completely taken down and a new, stronger wall needs to be built in its place. It takes the workers a whole day to take down the wall. At the end of the day, they hang the big sheets of plastic over the gap, secure the sheets with bricks and boards, then head home to their families. The sky is dark. The museum is quiet. The only movement is the night breeze tickling the edge of the plastic, looking for a way inside. So it's that magical Guyana night breeze that wakens the giant sloth and starts off the story. Thanks for asking that I do that.
Yeah. In that book, you have the 3 generations of people. What gave you the idea to make them all the same age as your main character? I find that a really interesting idea.
Yeah, I stole that from Dickens. I was on a walk one day trying to figure out how do I think about this generational suicide thing. And the phrase, the ghosts of suicides past, came into my head. So completely stole from Dickens. And I think it was because it's a book for young people. I wanted other young people to be talking to this young person. So everybody who gets to be old was once young. And I don't know where I'm going with this, but it just seemed like that's the way to do it, not to have a bunch of old people talking to him, because he's had old people talking to him and it hasn't worked. It's just like they're peers, but they've got all of these generations worth of experience at the same time. I thought that idea was kind of cool.
Yeah, I agree. I often think about what my ancestors would think of what I'm doing if they were my same age, or even if you could just meet them. It's such an intriguing idea to be able to meet them.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be great to be able to go back in time and meet like your great grandparents as our age, especially when we were kids, and that I think that'd be
what their lives were like, whether you have common interests or whether you're completely different.
Yeah, it'd be pretty exciting, I think.
If anybody has any questions, feel free to type those in. I do have another question. I know that you donate almost all of the royalties from your work to humanitarian organizations like the Mental Health Without Borders and Canadian Women for Women in Afghanistan. How do you decide which organization to donate to? And what would you suggest if people are looking for a legitimate organization to support?
It's helpful that it's a Canadian organization where the money goes. Then it can go directly from the publisher to them easily without having to change bank or money types. So if it's a Canadian organization, it's working on the ground and it's doing good stuff, then like that's worthy of support. I think if people are looking for good organizations, there's all kinds of great ways to find out. There's amazing work being done with American organizations in Afghanistan, and it just takes just a little bit of work to find out which those are. And I encourage people to do that, because we don't know yet what is going to be possible in terms of being able to support people inside Afghanistan. But I know there are organizations that are still working there, and they're still just trying to figure it all out. But that support is going to be needed ongoing. So I encourage people to do that.
Mm-hmm. What is the best way for readers to get in touch with you? Do you have an email address or?
DELLIS42@hotmail.com or through Groundwood Books.
Let me check here. There's your email, and then Groundwood is your publisher.
Yeah.
Okay, that's how I got in touch with you.
Yes.
For our festival. So we do respond to that email. All right, I just want to let everybody know that Deborah's books are available at our local Central Wisconsin bookstores, the Janke bookstore and Bound to Happen Books, Janke Bookstore in Wausau, and Bound to Happen Books in Stevens Point. You can also order on bookshop.org and support independent booksellers. I'm going to put in the chat a link to our survey as well, if you wouldn't mind taking a moment to fill out our survey. And it'll help us plan our events for next year. All right, if we don't have any final questions, we'll end there. Thank you so much, Deb, for being with us this evening.
Thanks, everybody. I really appreciate you taking your time out of your day to be a part of this. I thank you so much. This is a lot of fun and easier than I thought it would be.
Have a good evening, everyone.
Okay, bye.